Okay.
Anybody watching this, and probably yourself, will be bored by my example. I have used it so often.
Hmm.
The kobolds and you are, and we, our characters. I am thinking about uh, the woman who, hopes for my glory, right? So that,
Yes.
so she's been a little standoffish, but we all know that she hopes that I will become glorious. So, and all of my comrades, or whoever we are playing with, and the kobolds, and we are interacting, perhaps by this riverbank, or perhaps through the cracks in the stone that we are talking to them through. But actually, what I have in mind is that they're more visible. They have started to appear, through the trees. One of them is really obnoxious.
Hmm.
The game master has decided they're playing that one by the tree as just a real pain in the ass. He has already made all sorts of insulting comments. Before
Okay.
the role has been made, the game master is playing the hostility, right, and so on. One of the party characters, one of the player characters, is still trying to talk nice.
Hmm.
Still, nobody has said roll initiative yet. We are perhaps 45 seconds away.
Yes.
The game master is just beginning to wait for the pause to say roll initiative. And right then, one of the players says, I throw my axe at that kobold.
Yes, I'm familiar with that. That's good. Very nice. Hmm.
How does this relate to the beginning of combat as you play it? Is the When we roll initiative, is the axe already in the air or not? Do we resolve the axe strike before we roll initiative at all?
No. Typically, we go back in time and say, okay, as you,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, grab it or try to grab it, that's when initiative starts. So that you might be preempted.
Mm-hmm.
You have committed to attempting to draw it, but whether you complete the throw before anybody can react, that's up to the combat system.
Okay. Now, this is actually fairly important because I
Mhm.
can guarantee you, as you probably know, that unless you are working with a group of people who know this about you and about each other, in other words, they accept what you just said as a rule,
Yes.
someone's going to be pissed off.
Hmm.
After all, in every other context of play, I make an attack is the one thing that is sacred for a player to say. It's the one thing that in many contexts of play, the game master cannot go and fuck with you. And you just did. You stepped on my one little tiny patch of sacred space here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, in this sense, if you are comfortable with the way that you do it and find it functional and it suits play and the kind of situation we are talking about right now, seems to me quite likely to occur a lot in this game. Right?
Hmm.
This is a frequent a frequent set of uncertainties at work here, right? I mean, maybe they had been actually friendly, but you were enjoying playing one of them kind of obnoxious, and the character throws his axe at him, right? It could even happen with a friendly reaction roll. So,
Yeah, it would more intuitive to judge this based on the situation, whether it's surprising, whether there's a lot of energy behind it, suddenly doing it when the player is sort of enraged himself, or channels this rage of his character, and therefore actually let him do it, get that
well,
surprise round or
yeah,
whatever.
that's an interesting question, isn't it?
Yes, it
So,
is, but this is one of those things where, especially if character lives are at stake, I revert to really going closely by the rules, rather
yeah,
formally and so on.
right. I tend to agree with you about that. And if everybody understands that those are the rules, then it's just part of it. The player is enjoying
Mhm.
that response, but is well aware that, somebody's going to, either maybe a friend will jump on him, or maybe, the kobold will go into stealth mode, and do his fucking, those Germanic fairy creatures thing. They just sort of disappear, annoying.
Mhm.
Um, so, but before he can get the axe off. But if the player knows that, that's okay. They can still
Yeah.
have that reaction. They can still get going. They just know that they are not entitled to a free strike.
Hmm.
Whereas in some other game or some other table, and I'm not talking about your game, I'm now talking about generically, it is quite likely that we all accept that a statement of an attack during unordered play is an attack.
Hmm.
Right? So, what I'm trying to say is let's start looking at your rules for confrontations, because what you just said is a functional rule for your game.
Hmm.
And that is why saying it's OSR doesn't mean anything.
Hmm.
Just like PBTA, what is, as culturally speaking, I'm not talking about Vincent or Apocalypse World, but culturally speaking, saying OSR or PTA means everybody thinks that you are talking about a system that is actually quite reliable when it isn't. There isn't one, and it isn't.
Hmm.
If somebody says, but what about rulings? I will laugh in their face and say, what you are talking about are rules. Because if that's what we're doing at the table and that's what we are enjoying at the table and we know that's how we do it, that's what rules are. So
Hmm.
you can put it in your text and you can say, this is the way it works for this, and you are confident that this is the way it works for this. And again, if someone wants to change it, they just will. They just will.
Yes.
So let them do that, whatever. But for people who, as you are talking to, would like to have some kind of reliable foundation for their personal decisions, this is
Mm.
very helpful to know that saying I make an attack or something similar in unordered play kicks in the ordering system retroactively to the statement.
Yes.
And that seems like a very sensible thing. What other aspects of these confrontations, and it's hard to spot them, right? Because if you do them fairly intuitively yourself, it's hard to spot
Hmm.
that you are actually putting in rules where the text has none.
Hmm.
So it maybe is not something that is easily answered in this conversation. But
Well, maybe one example. Another thing is I do a lot of random targeting.
mm-hmm.
That is, again, I think this is a theme. I don't want to decide who the monster attacks.
Right.
Maybe I give it a probability. Yeah, 80% he attacks the fighter, and
Mm-hmm.
20% he actually goes for the weak mage or whatever. I do a lot of that.
Mm-hmm. That's quite interesting too. One of the important things about these dice driven things, which modules don't seem to understand historically and frighteningly consistently, I have
Hmm.
found that the authors of published scenarios seem to think that giving something a higher percentage, which is to say over 50%, means that it
Hmm.
will reliably happen in the instant, right? Not just across all the play of this scenario that, if it's 60% and we have 500 different groups play this, that we look and we see that it approximates 60%. That's not what they mean. They say, okay, well, it's got the high percentage. Okay, after you do that, right? They seem to, it's this strange misunderstanding that dice will be dice.
Yeah, you touched upon this in
Yeah.
your RuneQuest
Mm-hmm.
comments, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And we
Hmm.
can go back even a couple of years or a year or more when Lorenzo was writing about his game Pathfinder, in which
Hmm.
somebody did every possible bonus, right? Every possible tactical thing, and leaped to kill the bird in the midair, and it would be awesome. And of course, the dice, came up a 19 or something, and the poor thing didn't work, and everybody was like, "Oh, what's wrong with the system?"
Yeah, the system failed us. Yeah,
Yeah, and you're
that's.
like, "Wait, it's a die."
Mhm.
it's it, it's a you know and so that I think is an important consideration here, that you are not it I think in some of these modules, there's this, in the published text, there's this strange notion of you're rolling for it so that you seem objective, but we all know what's supposed to happen. I assigned it the larger
Mhm.
percentage. And then the text surrounding the whole event never even conceives. I mean, this is where you get the Call of Cthulhu situation, or many of the later D&D modules that basically say, well, failed rolls are just minor descriptive swerves, and
Yeah,
that's all they
if
are.
we don't do, we have to. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
we have to
DM has
stop. I
to
mean, so
give it to us.
mhm. And so all the players really are all the players need to do is just stick in there and just keep rolling, just keep going, just keep going. You see this in 5th edition D&D design, because the game is so freaking cream puff and soft,
Yes.
that as Jesse just wrote about at the site, that it is actually literally built for you to treat it like sort of just interactive entertainment. You get to say what you do, but so what? You just feel like you're involved as you are taken through the awesome adventure. And so the issue here, the reason I'm bringing this up, is that since you are throwing in a lot of these random factors, it's your attitude toward the outcomes that matters.
Hmm.
Does this seem to you related in any way to the fact that some of the outcomes in a fight can be quite grim?
Yes. As I wrote on the site, I need a constant string of death
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
to make it feel real in a sense that if the danger is real, characters will die, and if not, something is wrong. We might have a lucky streak, and that's
Right,
fine. That is
right.
great.
But we know it's a lucky streak. Right.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I'm playing Merkbori right now, and we have not yet come to the point where this seems to have hit. Right.
Hmm.
So, all right, with this in mind, um, we need to consider the relationship I have to my character, and this is quite related to Bushido and to Tunnels and Trolls and to Pendragon, which are all games
Hmm.
that have different aspects of character death as a reality, right?
Hmm.
Um, Bushido may have been the first. I cannot say this for a fact, and the nuances of things like Traveler and some of the other mid 70s, late 70s games are sometimes quite deep. But I know that Bushido was one of the early games in which you look at your dead character, and then aspects of what they have achieved then become
Hmm.
mechanical considerations for making the new character,
Hmm.
even if they don't know each other and there is no fictional relationship between them at all. I mean, you can
Yes.
make them fictionally connected, but you don't have to. In Pendragon, they are more logistically connected, usually because they are the son of the dead knight.
Yes.
So
Hmm.
they could be the squire or something, but there is this logistic connection. Better if it's the son, because then you keep the money, but the squire doesn't. But the point is that you have logistic continuity, and the time scale of play makes this possible. So those are just. Oh, and then
Absolutely
go ahead.
part of design.
Yeah.
Yeah, that if the game is lethal, there needs to be a way to continue that it doesn't
Right.
break down
Yeah.
and is functional.
And the same thing with Tunnels and Trolls in a completely different way, where if you clear your mind of modern reading and look at the text that I like so much, 5th edition, you will suddenly discover that it is completely expected that every player has 2 to 4 characters. And not only waiting on the sidelines, I mean in play at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
That a party is going to be at least twice as big as the group of players and perhaps 3 times or 4 times as big. And that this is considered normal play. And so
of my design,
yeah,
that players will have character stables.
but are they played at once? Are they played all at once, or are they played in and are you trading them in and out?
Yes. Okay. And you need to, because occasionally they will get lost in magical mists, and then you will have to bring in another character and so on.
Right. And who knows if they emerge from the magical mists later in some way.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay, so that's quite important. This has been resurrected as a more explicit feature of game design on and off through the history of play. Dark Sun in the early 90s.
Yes,
reintroduced it, right? And a lot of people were like, "Oh my God, that's so innovative," and I was like, "But, but anyway, that's just a historical point. The issue is that these are functional, and that therefore forms of character death become useful and exciting parts of play." One can then also even think of situations like in my Circle of Hands. If the current Circle Knights in a current venture are butchered, well, that becomes part of the history of the Circle, and other of the knights are going to have opinions about this as we continue to play. That game quite aggressively takes that principle of the stable and makes it a group phenomenon, as you probably know. So
that's cool.
So it's a little hard to get used to. If you made up the character and suddenly realize that no, you don't own that character at all, even from the beginning. That's a little jarring to get over, but it actually works quite well once you see it. So in the case of your game, then let me ask a few more interesting questions about the stable. I presume, tell me if I'm right, that the progression of each character is specific to that character's own history. So therefore, if you have not played Gunther, for a while, and Luther has been, becoming quite glorious, and Luther suddenly took, an oaken spear through his chest in this last game, that when Gunther steps in, what is his power level? What is his glory? What is his situation? Do all of your characters benefit a little bit from the glory that any of them have received, perhaps in that Bushido karmic way? Or fuck it, you get what you got. Gunther steps in with his donkey and his father's sword and not much else, and says, "Okay, I guess it's me now."